Yo, what's up guys, Toby from Master Box Show, and I hope you're having an amazing day today. Have you ever wondered how it looks like if a holy warrior of the light is corrupted and has taken its first step into the darkness? It's not actually a death knight or unholy knight per se. This is a type of guardian that spreads ailment and corruption to anything that is unfortunate enough to be in its way. Well, that is exactly what is the theme for today: acid damage. If you're looking for a frontliner that is practically untouchable, stacking debuffs after debuffs, has insane damage over time, amazing in solo or in a group setup, and able to make your enemies' lives a living nightmare, this is actually a revised version of my Guardian build. And honestly, this is one of the most powerful builds that I ever designed. Without further ado, I present to you the Acid Knight. Enjoy. Alright, here we are now guys in our character creation screen. This is where we will be building the foundation of our Acid Knight. For today, we are eyeing on two races that are interesting for the build, starting with the Elf and the Half Elf. The reason for this is we just need the sub race for these two races, which is the Wood variation. In my case, this is the Wood Half Elf. The sub race feature that we need is the Fleet of Foot. This will increase our move speed. For your preference, you can actually select from these two races, because most likely these two races had the same features, such as the base racial speed of 9 meters, dark vision, which you can see up to 12 meters, as well as Fey ancestry, which will provide you advantages in saving throws against Charmed and Sleep. The only difference is that the Half Elf has Civil Militia, which will grant us weapon proficiency with spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives, and armor proficiencies in light armor and shields. For the Elf, you actually get Elven weapon training, which grants you proficiencies with longsword, short sword, longbow, and short bow. In my case, I'll just go with the Half Elf, because the Civil Militia is a really nice proficiency to have. For the sub race, as I mentioned earlier, we are going with the Wood Half Elf version just for the Fleet of Foot sub race feature. For the classes, we are starting with the Cleric class. Aside from it gives us proficiencies in weapons such as simple weapons and morning stars, which we will be using a lot with, and armors such as light armor, medium armors, and shields. It also has the most important subclass that we need for the build, which is the Light Domain. The Light Domain gives us the cantrip Light, which will illuminate any light source that we have until long rest, as well as light domain spells such as Burning Hands and Fairy Fire. But the coolest subclass feature that we may get for the light domain, which is the Warding Flare. This will provide us with divine light and use a reaction to impose disadvantages on the attacker, possibly causing them to miss. For the cantrips, we can get any particular cantrip that we want. For the backgrounds, there are two backgrounds that are interesting for the build, starting with the Acolyte. This will provide us with insight and religion. I'll just go with Folk Hero, as animal handling and survival are really useful wisdom skills. For the abilities, I'll be showcasing two abilities for you guys today. This is gonna be starting with the Act 1 and Act 2 build, which is the early game, and the Act 3 build is where we can respec because of some really interesting items that we can include for our Acid Knight, make it as powerful as it can be. For the early game, we just have a priority of Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom. Dexterity is for our initiative in AC. We need as much AC as we can get for this build. Constitution is for our stamina and physical endurance, as well as our Constitution checks, and it also affects our hit points as well. For the third one of the most important thing that we need for the build is the Wisdom. It affects our Wisdom saving checks, as well as our Cleric spells that we are using for the build. And for the Act 3 or endgame ability setup, it will most likely look like this. We are now prioritizing more on strength, dexterity, and wisdom. We'll just get some strength because we're most likely gonna use a lot of melee attacks for this build. The next one is the dexterity, as I mentioned earlier, which is the initiative in AC that we can get. And finally, the wisdom is for the wisdom saving throws and the cleric spells and a few other spells that we will be introducing later on for this build. We'll just pump a little bit of intelligence because we're introducing a class that will benefit greatly from pumping some intelligence into the mix. Right after character creation, which is level 2 of our cleric, we just unlock one of the most powerful actions that we have for this build, which is the Radiance of the Dawn. Radiance of the Dawn is a really powerful class action that will provide 3 to 21 radiant damage in a really big AOE, and it just costs channel divinity charges. For the prepared spells, you can just get any prepared spell that you prefer, but I highly advise you get whatever healing spell that you can get your hands on. You're not only the tank of the party, you can also be the healer. Level 3 of our cleric, we just unlock a set of class features and a few spells, which is the Scorching Ray and the Flaming Spear. But the most important thing that we have here is the Warding Bond, and also one of the most useful healing spells in the game, which is Aid. It will increase our maximum hit points by 5 points until long rest. Level 4 of our cleric, we just unlock a couple of class features such as our level 2 spell slot, but the most important thing we need here is the feat. We are eyeing on the Dual Wielder feat. Dual Wielder is a really interesting feat to have. It gives us the ability to use 2 weapons, even if the weapons that we are equipping aren't light. We also gain additional 1 bonus AC while we wield 2 melee weapons in each hand. For the cantrips, I'll just go with Produce Flame. Level 5 of our cleric, we just unlock a couple of spells and light domain spells such as Fireball and Daylight. But the most important thing here is our first power spike. Just unlock a fundamental spell, which is the Spirit Guardian. It is a level 3 conjuration spell. It calls on spirits to protect us. Nearby enemies take 3 to 24 radiant damage or 3 to 24 necrotic damage per turn, and their movement is half. What's really cool about Spirit Guardian is that you can actually upcast it or increase the level of the spell to increase the damage that it deals every turn. Now for level 6 of our cleric, we are now doing something really interesting because we are introducing our first multi-class for the Acid Knight in the form of the Wizard. The Wizard is one of the most versatile spellcasters in the game, as well as we need to unlock our second important subclass as early as possible. For the cantrips, we'll just go for Acid Splash. It deals 2 to 12 acid damage to our enemies, and for the others, you can just get anything that you want. I'll just go with Poison Spray and Mage Hand. For the spells, I highly advise you get the most important spell for any spellcaster class, which is the Shield. And for the other two, you can just take Feather Fall and also Enhanced Sleep for utility. Level 7 of our character, which is level 2 of our Wizard, we're now unlocking our second subclass that is important for the build in the form of our Invocation subclass. This will provide us subclass features such as Sculpt Spell. It will create a pocket of safety within your invocation spell. Allies automatically succeed their saving throw against this spell and takes no damage from them. The reason for this is we are eyeing on a certain invocation spell later on the level that has a large AoE. In order for us to not have friendly fire, we just need this invocation subclass. And also we unlock Invocation Savant. Whenever we learn invocation spell from a scroll, it only costs half as much. For the spells, we just go with any utility spell and a really important spell, Chromatic Orb. Level 8 of our character, which is level 3 of our Wizard, we now unlock the important spell that I was talking about in a previous level, which is the Melf's Acid Arrow. This spell is really cool. Aside from it granting 6 to 24 acid damage, when we shoot a green arrow, it deals an instantaneous 4 to 16 acid damage and an additional 2 to 8 acid damage at the end of the target's turn. For the other one, we'll just go for the utility spell, Misty Step. Level 9 of our character, we're now introducing our third subclass to the mix, and we're just building up on our fighting capabilities in our melee classes in the form of the Fighter, which is the most powerful melee class in the game. And we are eyeing on the fighting style 2-weapon fighting. 2-weapon fighting will provide us passive feature. When we make an attack with our offhand weapon, we can add our ability modifier to the damage of the attack. Level 10 of our character, which is the Fighter level 2, we unlock our class action, which is the Action Surge. This will grant us an additional extra action for this turn per short rest. Now for level 11 of our character, which is Fighter level 3, we now unlock our final subclass for the build in the form of the Battle Master. The Battle Master will provide us superiority die and the maneuvers. For the maneuvers, we'll just go with disarming attack. This will provide us with a passive feature we can spend our superiority die on and deal additional 1d8 damage, as well as the chance to force the enemy to drop its weapon that it is holding. For the next one is the trip attack. This is almost the same as the disarming attack that we can spend superiority die on and an additional 1d8 damage, but the really cool thing here is we can knock the enemy prone. For the last one is the menacing attack, which again can cost the superiority die and deal additional 1d8 damage, but the most important thing here is it can frighten our enemies. Finally, level 12 of our character, we just unlock our final feat in the fighter in the form of the athlete. This basically gives us the opportunity to increase our strength or dexterity by 1 to a maximum of 20. So we'll just dump it into dexterity, and what's really cool about this is when we are prone, we can stand up and use less movement, and our jump distance can also increase by 50%. Alright, now I'm gonna be showing you guys the item setup that we need for the build. I'm gonna be showcasing 2 builds for you guys today, starting with the early game build, which is for the Act 1 and Act 2, and the other one is for Act 3, which is the end game build. What's really cool about this build, guys, is we already have all of the necessary items to make this build really powerful as early as Act 2. So we're going to be starting off with the Flesh Melter's Cloak. Whenever a creature deals melee damage to the wearer, that creature will take 1 to 4 acid damage. Next up is the most important armor in the game, which is the Luminous Armor. This will provide radiating shockwave. When the wearer deals radiant damage, these cause a radiant shockwave. What this means is that the radiant shockwave is a class action. This will inflict radiating orb in a 3-meter radius. Next is the Icarus Gloves. It grants the Icarus Corrosion. When the wearer deals acid damage, they also inflict noxious fumes upon the target. Next up is the Varsh Koku Boots, which gives us the passive Caretaker's Care. Acidic surfaces don't affect you. You are resistant to acid damage. For the rings, we need the Callous Glow ring in the early games because it provides us with the passive Callous Glow. The wearer deals an additional 2 points of damage against creatures that are illuminated. For the weapons, we have a few items that we need in order for us to make this really powerful early game, starting with the Drake Throat Glaive. This has the passive Vicious Dragon's Breath. The enemies have disadvantage on saving throws against your Dragonborn Breath weapons, but we don't actually need that passive because we are eyeing on a certain skill or elemental skill with this weapon, which is the Draconic Elemental Weapon. This is a level 3 transmutation spell. This can imbue our weapon with elemental power. It receives a +1 bonus to our attack rolls and deals an additional 1d4 damage of our choosing. What we're gonna do here is we are selecting a weapon that we are using for the build. In my case, I will be using the Corrosive Flail, and we will be dropping it to the ground, and we will be using the Drake Throat Glaive, particularly the Draconic Elemental Weapon, to imbue this weapon with elemental damage. In my case, I will be imbuing it with the Draconic Elemental Weapon Acid, which will grant 1 to 4 acid damage. So I'll just use it here to the Corrosive Flail. Now it has the elemental damage. As you see here, the Corrosive Flail now has the acid damage from the Draconic Glaive buff, which is 1d4 acid. What's really cool about this is for as long as the Drake Throat Glaive is in your inventory, you can swap it out and include the Corrosive Flail in its stead. So we get the 1d4 acid damage for as long as the Drake Throat Glaive is in our inventory. For the second weapon that we need is the Shining Stave of the Skulls. What we need here is the radiating damage for us to proc radiating orb damage or radiating orb charges to our melee attack. So I'll just put it here. We now have radiant damage as well as acid damage for our weapons. Now we're going to be talking about the Act 3 build, which is the endgame build. There are only a few additional items that we need to really make our build powerful. Starting with the Helm of the Balduran. This will grant us Balduran's Vitality. The helm heals you 2 points at the beginning of every turn, as well as Balduran's Favor. we have a bonus 1 to our AC and saving throws, stun immunity, and attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. Next is the most powerful amulet in the game, which is the Amulet of Greater Health. This will basically increase our constitution to 23. For the rings, we'll just go with the Caustic Band. This will provide us the Malefic Excretion. Our weapon attacks will also deal additional 2 acid damage. And the final thing for the rings, which is the Ring of Protection. This will grant us +1 to our AC, as well as +1 to our saving throws. For the weapons, we are going with the Sacred Star. Aside from it dealing 8 to 21 damage and a +1d4 acid damage. What's really cool about this is it grants us the passive Radiant Strike. On hit, it inflicts 1 turn of Radiating Orb upon the target. It also has a Sanctifying Weapon. Undead creatures struck by this weapon are possibly turned. Alright guys, I'm now going to be showing you some active gameplay on how we properly utilize our Acid Knights. After a long rest, you just need to activate Aid. This will provide us with an additional 5 hit points until long rest. This will have an effect to every single ally in the area, which is really cool. Now our HP just increased by 5. Don't forget to activate the Warding Bond whenever you have it. So I highly advise, if you have any character in your camp that has the ability to use Warding Bond, you just use it on our Acid Knight and it's good to go. Now we're going to be starting a battle with our Acid Knight. We just need to use Spirit Guardian on turn 1 or whenever we can. So I'll just use Spirit Guardian here to deal additional radiant damage to our enemies, and don't forget to increase it to the maximum, which is level 4. This will deal an additional 4d8 radiant damage every single turn whenever they are in the area of the Spirit Guardian. We'll just use Spirit Guardian here. Now we just try to attack and start a battle. So if ever you can use Melf's Acid Arrow to increase our first set of acid damage to our enemies. You can just select it to any enemies that you prefer to just start off the battle with it. Now as you see here guys, I just inflicted Spirit Guardian damage to our enemies. If you notice, the enemy already has Spirit Guardian damage, but the most important thing here is the Noxious Fumes. This will deal 1 to 4 acid damage in a 3-meter radius for as long as they are inside the Noxious Fumes. The reason for the activation of this, because of our gloves, is whenever we deal acid damage, we can also inflict Noxious Fumes on the target. On top of the acid condition, which reduces the AC by 2, not to mention the Melf's Acid Arrow that we used earlier, which the enemy will take 2 to 8 acid damage after their turn, as well as the Radiating Orb that we are dealing when they are hit by the Spirit Guardian or whenever we attack them with our melee attack. So I'll just try to hit this enemy here to deal radiant damage and acid damage to increase the chance of the Noxious Fumes to come out. As you see here, we just dealt Noxious Fumes again. We'll just use maybe don't react, whatever. Most likely we'll just deal any damage we're doing with this character. Just don't react, just let them hit us, whatever. I'll just spread another Noxious Fumes. What's really cool about this guys is Noxious Fumes is actually an AOE around the enemy that has the Noxious Fumes, meaning that whenever the enemy moves around, they inflict Noxious Fumes to whatever target that is unfortunately in the vicinity. And whenever the Noxious Fume activates, it also grants Radiating Orb charges to those enemies, which is really cool. For this turn, we're going to be using our Radiance of the Dawn to inflict additional radiating damage to our enemies, as well as to spread Radiating Orb charges as far as we can. We'll just inflict this. Now we just dealt radiant damage to our enemies. Miss. Yeah. Then just hide. That's damage. Miss. Miss again. And another miss. As you see here, there is an area of the Noxious Fumes. Every single time the enemy moves around, Noxious Fume charges will be spread out to any target that is unfortunately in the area. Radiant Explosion, it's our turn now. So we'll just try to attack using this character. That was a miss, damn. spreading Spirit Guardian charges to as much enemies as we can, and go back. Ending our turn. Radiating damage. Now it's time for us to attack again with our Acid Knight. We'll just try to finish off any opponents that we can for this turn. So I'll just try to melee attack this, and now spread Noxious Fumes to the enemies, as well as try to proc Radiating Orb charges to any target that we can unfortunately have, and ending our turn. Fumes, not again. Another Radiant Explosion and one damage side. Look at how much debuffs enemy has, it's crazy. So here. Just let enemies kill themselves here. As easy as that. And that's it, guys. Thank you for watching the video. This build is one of the most powerful builds that I made so far. It is a really powerful frontliner that is practically untouchable, able to stack debuffs after debuffs, has so much damage over time, it's ridiculous, and can really make the lives of our enemies a nightmare. But yeah, what do you guys think about the build? Did I go overboard with the debuffs and the damage over time with this one? Or do you guys have some tweaks to further make this build insane? Would love to know what you guys think in the comments, including the questions or clarifications that you may have. Shoutouts for all the people who subscribe and keep supporting the channel. And a big shout out to Grams D68 for the super. Thank you so much, guys, for the amazing support. For all the people who haven't subscribed yet, I hope I earn your subscription in the future. But if I earn it today, please don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out a lot. And I almost forgot, guys, please consider joining our D20 Rollers Club by clicking the join button. It directly supports me in what we do in the show. And that's it for me. I hope to see you soon on the next Master Box Show. Peace out. Bye, guys.